All right, and welcome everyone to Launch 2020 Q4, the last launch event of the year, and we are trying to make sure that we are culminating all of the best stuff of the year and putting it together here for you. My name is Brian Bork. I am the Senior Technical Readiness Trainer. I am here with Learn On Demand Systems to help bring the concept of performance-based testing and exam creation. And I want to thank you all for being here. I am very pleased with the turnout, and I see some familiar names, and that's great. We love to have those familiar names in here. But some of the names that you may not be aware of are up in our list of presenters. I'm joined here by a couple of people from our technical services team, Tier 1 and Tier 2. We've got Benjamin Erkenbach and Ryan Hall, and Ronald Thompson, otherwise known as Ronnie. We also have our wonderful coordinator and the person who keeps my schedule moving, Kristen Loy. And I'm just really, I know this isn't Thanksgiving anymore, but I'm really thankful that we've got you all here, and I hope that you're going to get a lot out of this. Now, I saw during the keynote today with Corey and Brian Patchke and James Burnham, there were some questions about performance-based testing in the future. We're going to be taking a look at what's available now. So some of the stuff that we'll be talking about is how you can move towards the future, but all of the technologies we're going to be talking about are the technologies that are available now. And as I mentioned, this is a culmination of all the things that we've put together over the year. So some of the slides may look a little bit familiar, but some of the topics might be, and the demonstrations might be slightly different. So hang with me. I am going to turn off my camera and stop talking at you and hopefully start talking with you. So here is the basics of our agenda here. Before we get started with the agenda, we should definitely make sure that you know that you can go out and post and win. This is the exact same slide that you saw during the keynote, and it will be the same slide that will be up. You can link to us or post in any of these three areas, LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook. Make sure you link to us using the @ or the slashes for Learn On Demand Systems or LOD Systems. If you tag us, our social media notifications go off, and then we will go out and pick some of our favorites. We really like the ones that show you in the picture, but obviously if you don't want to be seen in the picture, by all means, go ahead and just take a picture of you or your computer with the agenda or the post page or whatever you want up and available. But don't forget to do that. We'll be reminding you at the beginning of each of the sessions. All right, so what are we going to talk about? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get some definitions out of the way, but then we're going to talk about modifying a basic lab and adding scoring activities. Now, turning a lab into a scored lab is part and parcel to getting to the place where it is an exam. We are going to look at putting all of the pieces together, and we're going to do it very quickly. This is not a hands-on component where you're going to be doing this, but all of you should, if you have a Lab on Demand account, you should be able to do this. If you don't have a Lab on Demand account, you can contact sales@learnondemandsystems.com, and they will be able to help you get an account and get you set up. So we're going to start off with modifying basic labs and adding scoring activities. That'll get us into a scored lab. Then we'll talk about moving beyond just scoring things and building activity-based assessments that either check the VM or the cloud. Now, when we say VM, we're referring to virtual machines. And we're talking about the cloud, we're talking about scoring in either Azure Portal or AWS Portal. And then the final aspect of this will be turning that into an exam and then seeing the results of that exam. So let's get some terms and phrases here. The low stakes testing versus high stakes testing. Now, for people who suffer from test anxiety, high stakes testing is obviously much more debilitating than low stakes testing. Low stakes testing is right along the same line as a teacher asking questions during class. They're usually exams or tests or scored labs that are not proctored, they're unsupervised. They're designed to see whether or not you can learn enough to get through what is on the page or in the exam. This may lead to a certificate or a badge. High stakes testing are typically supervised or proctored exams that typically lead towards a certification, an actual reward for the actual test. Inside of those exams, you typically have different item types. Now, the item types that we support at Learn on Demand Systems right now are multiple choice with single or multiple answer, fill in the blank, case studies where you describe something and then have them do that, and then the concept of a scored lab, which has activity-based assessments. So multiple choice question, MCQs, or fill in the blanks, FIBs. These are item types which test knowledge and memory, and then activity-based assessments are item types that check the lab environment to see if something has been completed. This is a skill-based item. And that's really where things are at right now. Now, I realize that I may be setting the Wayback Machine here, but I became an MCT in 1997. I'm sorry, I became an MCSE in 1997. I became a Microsoft Certified Trainer, an MCT, 2 years later in 1999, and I've been an MCT for all of that time. And so I remember when it was a culmination thing. You took a test, and even if you passed it, that still didn't result in you proving that you had enough knowledge. You needed to pass a number of tests. At one time when I got my MCSE, I actually had to pass 7 exams, 4 cores and 3 electives. And at that time, TCP/IP, believe it or not, was an elective. That really does set the Wayback Machine in my mind. I'm sort of going back to the remembering of this. Now, these were all multiple choice or fill in the blank types of questions, and they were very, very specific. They were usually very long-winded questions, and the answer was almost always add more RAM. That was the correct answer in most of those exams. However, nowadays, we are not in the day and age of one exam does not equal a certification. Now we are doing role-based certifications. And so you prove that you can do parts of a job, like you can manage users and groups, or you can manage permissions, or you know how to set up Active Directory federated services. Each one of those results in a type of certification. Now, there are still some culminations where you add all of those certificates up and you get or certifications up and you get sort of a bundled certification. But for the most part now, it's all about testing if you know how to do a specific task or set of tasks. And so this is what you need to be thinking about. Now, the people who think about this for a living are called, and I love this term, psychometricians, because it really does sound like some sort of magician that does something really psychotic. But psychometricians, and Microsoft has some of the best in the world. And I've had a very good fortune to be able to get to know some of the psychometricians at Microsoft as an MCT, and their job is to practice the science of educational and psychological measurement, or in other words, testing. And so what they do is they focus on what type of knowledge you're testing and how you're testing that knowledge. And there's taxonomies that they use, and there's educational insights, and just all sorts of terminology. And there's a lot of Venn charts or Venn diagrams where they have to say if this question is right and this question is right, who is that testing the right sweet spot and things like that. There's just all sorts of really enthusiastic science behind that. Now, once you oh, you know what? Before I continue, I should probably tell you, if you have any questions, feel free to type those questions in our chat, and either somebody on the call will type a response to you, or we'll save up those questions for later and we'll put them at the end at a QA session. So I forgot to mention that at the beginning. I should also mention, now that we're already deeply engaged here, I got so excited for my first session here. I should also mention this session is being recorded, and you will be able to access the recording after. You'll receive a link to the recording as an attendee. So just got those housekeeping notes out of the way. So like I said, psychometricians design labs or design exams, whether they be multiple choice or skill-based or whatever, but they're testing different areas of knowledge, and they do them in very, very controlled and scientific ways. You may not be a psychometrician or have a psychometrician on staff, but that doesn't mean that you can't design exams or scored labs to be able to pass on to your students. The best method of learning that we have found over the years is challenge-based learning. And if you've seen any of our challenges, you will know that we do great things with checking to see whether or not people can do specific tasks. Can you build a Linux machine in Azure? Can you administrate users and groups in Azure or on a virtual machine, on a server? Those types of proofs lead towards designed aspects of knowledge. You know that a person who completes this actually did the work. You don't have to go back in and check their lab to see how they did it. You know that they did it successfully because you wrote the checks that went in to see whether or not that work got done. All right, so what in a nutshell is performance-based testing, or PBT? You ensure that you're obtaining proper learning metrics. In other words, you're making sure that what has been presented or what somebody says that they know, they actually know. You test real-world skills and knowledge. It isn't just about skills. Obviously, it is important to know whether or not somebody can do the tasks that are needed. But knowing when to use those tasks or to perform those tasks and when not to is just as important. And I use the example of a light. If you walk into a room and you turn on a light switch and the light doesn't go on, without the proper knowledge, you could rewire the entire room and maybe the light bulb will go on, or you could go over and check the light bulb and see whether or not the light bulb's loose or if it's out, or you could just replace the light bulb. Knowing which of those things to do is a knowledge level. Doing those things and knowing how to do those things, either rewiring the room or changing the light bulb, is a task. Knowing which task to perform is the knowledge. So multiple choice questions and fill in the blanks are still valid for knowing that you know something or knowing that your end users know something. Real world skills are tested using the activity-based assessments and using the tools that gives you. Creating your own certification and reward system. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever dreamed of this, but I've always imagined a world where I could make up my own certification and teach my own certification. As a matter of fact, I work with a team that's called MCTISC, which is for a instructional skills class for MCTs. And so we are working very hard to do a real world and real world skills and multiple choice questions and fill in the blanks for MCTs in order to know that they know how to teach properly. Now that's really hard to do, especially in a computer-based exam. However, we are working on it, and I think that's a great thing. But now remember that a certification is only as valid as whatever it is that you're delivering. So, for example, Microsoft has MCTs, or I'm sorry, MCSEs, or they have specific role-based level certifications now, Azure Administrator and Azure Associate and Azure Developer and things like that. So they have those terms, but those are recognized and supported because Microsoft says they're valuable. Your company may have a certification that's valuable to your company, but isn't valuable to the rest of the world. If you look at, is somebody an MCSE? Does that make them better at a job? Not necessarily. Nowadays, with the role-based certification, you know that somebody is good at administrating Azure or developing in Azure or whatever, but are they good at a specific task that you need them to do? You make your own certification for it and you test them and then give them some sort of reward system, whether it be an internal, where, for example, your help desk takes a exam proving that they know XYZ about your product. They then get a badge that they display. It appears next to their name in your company portal. That is just an example. There are all sorts of things that you can do with your own certification and your own reward system. The key to this is you decide. There's no world organization that says what a certification is or certification isn't. So you make the certification and you decide what that certification needs in order to be a specific reward, whether it's a certificate or in today's world, a lot of digital badging is being done out there. Okay, so how can Learn on Demand systems specifically help you out with your PBT? Well, we have a professional services team which can help you implement your own already designed exam objectives. You need to tell them what it is that you want to test, and then they will help you make up a test that goes along with that. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to design the exam that tests exactly what somebody needs to do. We have other third-party teams like NetLogon and others that can create exam objectives and activities for PBT for you. We provide you the tools for activity-based assessment, multiple choice questions, and fill-in-the-blank questions in exams using the Lab on Demand's IDLx editor, which we're going to demo in just a little bit. And if you use your exams and distribute your exams through our OneLearn Training Management System, or TMS, we also support Credly badging. And so you develop your badge on Credly, and then it will actually follow along. Credly badges are recognized on LinkedIn. I think they're registered, or they're displaying in Facebook as well. They have all sorts of capabilities so that not only is your badge going to be something that can be displayed in your internal portal, but it can be displayed externally as well. All of those are available through Learn on Demand systems. Now, as you heard mentioned during the keynote, and maybe you even saw my accidental post, I was going to put a slide in, and I did put a slide in on the Challenge Labs blueprint. Now, Challenge Labs are not necessarily exams. You could turn them into exams very easily, but if you want to put your own challenge-based lab, like I'm going to be showing later on, together, we actually have a blueprint for how to do it. If you need this or want this, you can go to www.learnondemandsystems.com/Challenge Labs Blueprint with a dash in between, challenge-labs-blueprint. And there's a form there. You fill it out with your name and you will get access to the documentation. And I have to tell you, amongst the things that we provide for our customers, this is probably one of the preeminent things that we give to our customers. And if you don't necessarily already have an account with us, this document could make you want to have an account with us, just because It is so easy to follow along. You don't have to have special permissions. You don't have to do anything special. All you need to do is have an idea about what you want to certify, and away you go. All right. Just a couple of last minute notes here. We talked about low stakes versus high stakes. Scored labs are typically low stakes testing, whereas PBT is typically a high stakes testing, resulting in some sort of certification. Scored labs are designed to check your knowledge as you go, whereas PBT, we're trying to check to make sure that you are capable of doing whatever the overall topic is that we're trying to cover. In scored labs, items are typically scored as you go and you get the results. Sort of a yes, no, I completed this, whereas PBT is usually decided at the end of the exam, and or the results are determined at the end of the exam, and you're given your score at the end of the exam, whereas scored labs you typically do not. Usually the number of multiple choice questions and fill in the blanks are higher in a scored lab, although it can contain activity-based assessments, whereas PBT is primarily activity-based assessment with fewer multiple choice questions and fill in the blanks. But remember, as I discussed earlier, it doesn't mean that you don't do fill in the blanks. Okay. Another good idea when you're coming up with your exams. Remember, you could just build an exam with just questions, and this could prove the knowledge that somebody needs. However, any predictable pattern can be memorized. If you allow somebody to retake the exam and it's exactly the same every single time they take it, they're probably going to figure out the correct answers. And once they figure out the correct answers, they are going to just use those to be able to, that they're just going to click on where it is. So some of the things that we have given you the ability to do now is reuse your answers in random order. In other words, if your question is what is 1 + 1, and it goes 1, A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, D is 4, and people see those answers, they're going to say, oh, I'm going to determine which one's right, and then every time this question comes up, I'm going to click on that spot. By simply reordering, randomizing the order in which those answers appear, you can actually shake that up and require them to actually sit and think about what the correct answer is. You can also use groups of questions to randomize questions into pools. And I'm going to show you an example of that right away when we get into the multiple choice. But you can have a pool of questions and only, like, let's say you have 4 questions and only display 2 of those, but it randomly picks which of those 2 you get. So we're going to show you how easy this is right now. So let me end my slides, and you're going to see, hopefully everybody's visible or seeing my screen, doing what they need to do. So we're going to start off with multiple choice questions because they're the easiest ones. Now, one of the things that I stressed when I did my lab developer workshop on PBT was that I stressed that you don't have to make a virtual machine and a bunch of other stuff in order to make a test. You can make a test out of just, quote unquote, the instructions. For example, when I click on the launch button here, you will see that my lab comes up, and it comes up very quickly. Questions. Okay. You can see that it comes up with 2 math questions and then a question that is, what is Brian's favorite color? Now, I'm not, because some of you attended my previous workshop, I'm not going to do a gift card for what my favorite color is or any of the other questions here, because some people have prior knowledge. But I might put another question in and show you exactly how easy it is to do. But what I wanted to show here is, if I minimize this background here and I put this out here, this lab is a lab, right? This is a scored lab. This could be an exam. So you could put this activity in. I want you to think about this for a second. Put this activity in at the beginning of your class, and ask a bunch of questions about what it is that you're going to be doing in the test or during the class. Then you go through and you do, your instructor-led training in normal circumstances over whatever topic you're covering, and then at the end you have a follow-up exam that's just an exam. There's no virtual machine, or maybe there is a virtual machine and you're testing to see whether or not people actually got the topic by looking at a brand new virtual machine and having to do whatever activity it was you just taught them, or a similar activity. That can be a really effective way of being able to deliver this, either with just questions at the beginning and just questions at the end with the standard instructor-led, or maybe you do no assessment at the beginning, you do a challenge-based lab, and then at the end you have a little follow-up with just questions, making sure that you're touching on the topics that they need. The end result is there is no limitation here. You could do whatever you want to do, but I wanted to show you that you don't have to include a virtual machine or a cloud portal as your method. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end my lab here and just show you quickly the instructions. Let me bring that back up. So here is my lab profile. If you're not familiar with lab profiles, we do have some sessions on creating those. I think tomorrow we have one where we talk about the template gallery and how we can use that. We're just going to further some of the information that James showed you earlier today. But if I don't need to edit the profile, but if I edit my instructions, you will see that I have my following questions. Here's math, and here's what's Brian's favorite color. So my activities, though, even though there's only 2 questions appearing on the right-hand side, if I go to my activities, you will see that there are actually 4 questions in the pool. But if I go in here to the group, you can see that this is called the multiple choice question group. Its alias is group 1. And we are randomizing the group, and we're displaying 2 activities. I can also do an on-demand evaluation, which is I'm going to test to see whether or not you got any of the questions correctly if I do the on-demand evaluation, and then I can also change the evaluator button. But I'm not going to do any of that, but notice here that I have 1 + 1, 2 + 2, 3 + 3, and 4 + 4. And then, of course, of these have their own correct answer selected. And also notice here that I can randomize the answer sequence, which I am doing here. All right. This is what I was talking about before. I don't want it to, number 2 to always, the answer of 2 to always be in the second slot. So if I go back in here and I refresh this page, you'll notice that it changed. I've now got 1 + 1 and 3 + 3. If I refresh again, nope. Hold on. So you don't always get a new one. There you go. Here's 3 + 3 and 1 + 1, which is the exact same question, but in a different order. And believe it or not, just that simple thing can actually disrupt people and prevent them from just clicking on, oh, this one's C, this one's D, that kind of stuff. All right, by the way, the answer to my favorite color is blue. And you can see that the answers that you select inside of the activities themselves are, those are the ones that show inside of your edit instructions window. But when you go and launch this, let me close this out again. When you go ahead and launch this, that launch instance sort of locks this into place. So I've got my 3 + 3 and my 2 + 2. If I were to exit, just close the window and relaunch, I would want to make sure I got those same things again. So like if I close this screen and I click on launch, I want to make sure that this doesn't change from 3 + 3 and 2 + 2. This is my exam instance now, so I want this one to stay with me as I go through. So my questions are set or established for this particular exam when I come in. So even if I refresh my screen, it won't change. But notice the answers are not automatically selected. And then I've got my possible answer. So I'm going to guess that 3 plus 3 is 11, and 2 plus 2 is 1, and Brian's favorite color is yellow. And I can go ahead and check. I tried to be nice about my response. You were not as correct as you could be. And then if I go to blue, yes, you are right. Okay. And then, of course, I can end my exam and close. Now, if I want to use this as an exam, one thing that you should note when I go into my activities is that these are not actually being scored, meaning even though I answered the questions and I answered many of them incorrectly, but even though I answered my questions, I wasn't actually being recorded as whether or not I got my answers correct or not. It's because they're in a concept called practice mode. But if all I need to do to enable scoring on anything, whether it's fill in the blank or multiple choice questions, all I need to do is turn on my scoring. And then you'll notice here I have the ability to score. And because I'm displaying 2, obviously my passing score needs to be something out of 2. And I can, you'll notice that my favorite color isn't being scored. I didn't set it for that. So if I edit this, I can go in and say, yes, this is going to be scored. And then I can have it have a higher score value, for instance. Let's say that getting this one answer right is going to equate to having a score of 2. And I'm going to go ahead and save. So now notice that my passing score is changed to 4, and now I want to make sure that it's 3 out of 4 to be correct. So let's go ahead and close this out and launch it one more time. You'll see here that it'll come up very quickly. And here we are. We've got 4 plus 4 and 2 plus 2, and then my favorite color. So we're going to go with 4 plus 4 is 8, 2 plus 2 is 3, and my favorite color is black. And I'm going to click on submit. And are you ready to submit it for grading? And then, sorry, you did not pass. You got 1 out of 4. Now, I know a question that all of you are probably asking, as a end user, can I see what I got wrong and what I got right? Not yet, but as was maybe mentioned during the keynote, coming soon, we're going to have a scoring report for the students. All right. We'll talk more about that when we get into the exams. All right. So just to move quickly into fill in the blank, I do want to be mindful of our time to make sure that you are able to get to your next session. So I just want to make sure we are running until 12:45. Perfect. I just want to make sure that we're going to have time for questions and answers at the end. All right, so here is our scored lab with fill in the blank questions. Going to go ahead and launch it. And you can see here that we have a couple of different things. One of them is an example of a text box. And some of you were, or there were questions about branching inside of labs. And James made a very good point. Right now, you can manually branch people to different sections with either a drop-down or what we call a text box. So this is an example of a text box. And inside of this text box, we have to put the correct answer in order to move ahead. So this might be a question like, what is the IP address of your virtual machine, which would, base that on your virtual machine, or it would be, it might be something knowledge-based, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at how we do these. This is called sectioning or using sections. And the way they're defined is by 3 colons. And when you put 3 colons in, it creates a section, and then that section has the password, which is fill in the blank. Now, I do have to caution you, if you give them this answer once, right now there's no way of randomizing which question you ask during a section, right? So you just have them fill in the blank. You give them you fill in the box. And but the problem is that right now that is a singular answer. So it's sort of like, if you put this answer in, we're going to take you to this section. If you don't, we're going to take you to this other section. So you can branch it that way. Personally, I believe that once we have that flow control that Corey was demonstrating or was diagramming towards the end of his presentation this morning, I think that there's going to be a lot more capability for being able to do the branching. Okay, so you'll see here that we have the fill in the blank, and then we have what is the southernmost continent on Earth, and then what is the name of Brian's cat. So let's take a look at these activities once again. You'll notice that they're both in practice mode, so we're not scoring those. So you could turn on scoring very quickly and easily, but in this case, we're just using the practice mode, and you can see that the question is very simple. What is the southernmost? And then we have short answer exact match, or we have short answer with a regex match. Now, some of us are very, very good at, or some of you are very, very good at regex, and some of us are not. So I'm not using regex here, but when we say exact match, there is a little checkbox here for case sensitive. So if you want to make sure that they're capitalizing Antarctica because it is a continent, you would put that in and check it, and then it would have to be capitalized. All right. But with regex, you can put in any sort of, if you want them to put in an IP address, for instance, you can say up to 3 numbers with a dot, and then up to 3 numbers or numerals and a dot, and up to 3 numerals. You could put that format in. If the answer was supposed to be a phone number, you could put that format in with the dashes. But there's all sorts of regex matching that you can do with the fill in the blank. And of course, you have the ability to do the on-demand evaluation or even blocking motion forward. And this is how you can create those branches. If you block the motion forward, unless they answer correctly, then you can use that as a way of making sure that they know the answer before they move on. All right. So those are the basics. The concept of fill in the blank and multiple choice question. Now, once again, proving knowledge, really, really effective, really, really important, has been used for years and years and years. However, let's move more into the activity-based assessment, and that involves using a virtual machine. So I have a lab that has virtual machines and has a set of instructions. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that up, and I'm going to minimize my so that we're only looking at the lab. So I use this example a lot. So if you've seen it before, I apologize, but I really like the way this works because it involves using multiple choice questions to work with the virtual machine instead of just proving knowledge. It's going to say, hey, what is the status of this right now? And then, hey, here's a new status, all right? So here it is. Here's my virtual machine. Here's my my instructions. I click on my virtual machine and I go ahead and paste the password. And then my instructions are pretty simple. Count the number of icons on the desktop to the left, and then how many icons appear. There's only one right answer. You know what the right answer is because you designed the lab interface. Oops. There we go. So if I count correctly, I believe there are 6 of those. So I'll go ahead and select 6 and then go on next. Now, it wants us to do something to this desktop. Now, this is where the checking into the lab or into the virtual machine becomes important. And again, you can do virtually anything that can be created. I was told to create a test.txt on the desktop, and let's go ahead and check and see if this is done correctly. By the way, it changes between score and check if you are actually scoring the lab or not. All right, so right now this is going through and it's checking the entire contents of the desktop of this machine. And by the way, I did it successfully. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and click on next. And now this is the part that I love. I'm going to click on a button that's going to randomize things. In other words, there's no way that I, as a test taker, can know what's going to happen when I click on this. So I click on this, and this goes out and tells the virtual machine to put a random number of files on the desktop. You see it just populated, and it even gave me a little thing and said that it populated. And now it says enter the number of text documents on the desktop below, and then click on check or score. So I count 1, 2, 3 that were added. So let's go ahead and put 3 in and click on score. Well, this has been set up in a challenge-based scenario because it is telling me, nope, you were wrong because we forgot to include the original test.txt. So you guys were probably yelling at your screen, no, Brian, it needs the test.txt as well. So let's do this again. Because we can use retries, I'm going to have it populate a number. So it's added 2 more. So now I have a total of 6. So let's go ahead, including my test.txt. We'll put 6 in, and we'll click on score. Nice job. The 6 is the correct answer. And then I click on submit to submit my test for grading. All right. And there you go. It has been submitted. Now, this is one where we submitted it, but we told it not to give the user a report at the end. And trust me, we'll get to that in just a second. Okay. So what does that look like? How do we actually go about doing all of those things? Well, first of all, the multiple choice question appears and it has a specific setting, right? So we go to our how many icons appear on your desktop. There it is. And notice that that one is scored and has a score value of 1. Then we have does the lab file exist? And with lab file exist, we're doing that test.txt to see if it is there. Now what we're doing is we're taking that Windows 10 participant machine and we're submitting a PowerShell command with a score value of 1 to see whether or not this test.txt exists. And if it does, we ultimately end up with a result of true. Now, when you're submitting these, the ultimate thing that you want is a result variable. Result variable is by default in, well, I shouldn't say by default. It always should be set to false at the beginning of your score PowerShell. But by the end of the script, at least one of the paths through this, if you do an if, then, else, regardless of what you do, one of those values should end up with a $result equaling true. And you can see right here, this is only true if we do the if, else. So we've got to really go through and you have to think about what you're looking for. Now, right now, we have PowerShell to the VM. We've also got the ability to be able to do Windows Command Shell as well as Bash. But in the future, we are also going to have PowerShell to both clouds, and that would be to the Azure portal and AWS, as well as multiple languages to the cloud using our new cloud scripting engine. And this is going to be really, really cool. So look for that webinar coming very soon to be able to show you that. Okay, so speaking of the cloud, let's go ahead and take a quick look at our cloud-based scoring. Now, in this particular case, our cloud scoring is based on a cloud UI or a portal-based learning. So we're going to go out to Azure and we're going to check to see whether something's done. And if any of you have ever attended any of our webinars before, We use this example a lot. This is a copy of a challenge lab that's in our challenge lab library for Azure. And if we look at our instructions here, you will see that our instructions are very both sophisticated, but also very simplistic. This is the concept of a challenge lab. And this is one of the things that I think really helps with learning. You're testing from the moment they get into the test, right? And by what I mean by that is we are testing to see whether or not somebody has the knowledge that they need in order to complete what we want them to complete. So in this particular case, we're asking a question: can you provision public and private blob storage for a web app? And the way you start that is by creating a storage account and giving it some blob containers. And the way you check that is by checking your work. Now, in this particular case, this isn't an exam. This is not PBT. It is challenge-based learning. But we could quickly turn this into an exam by simply going to our activities and enabling scoring to see whether or not somebody completed their exercises, right? So if we turn on scoring, we can give them the scoring result, and we can change this to they need to get 2 out of 3, and that activity is based on this specific score right here, where we are doing 3 different activities or 3 different scoring methods, and each one of those is worth 1 point. If you don't get 2 out of those 3 correct, you're not going to be able to pass, and you're going to get a notice that says, hey, you didn't do so well. But this is submitting, once again, PowerShell out to the web, specifically to a cloud-based subscription. Now, it is really important to remember, if you're doing scoring online using cloud technologies, you have to be using a cloud-based subscription through LOD. If you were to try to submit this to just Azure, we don't have the opportunity to target just a instance of Azure. So you want to make sure that you're targeting a specific cloud subscription as it's spun up using our Cloud Slice technology, either using Cloud Slice subscription or Cloud Slice resource group. Okay. And just to show you an example of what this looks like, I'm going to turn that scoring off again. And I'm going to go ahead and launch this. And now you'll see what our, oops, there we go, what our cloud-based UI looks like, as well as what the challenge-based learning looks like. And you can see here that we've got our instructions on the right-hand side and a screen on the left-hand side. Oops. There we go. And it is using my local machine, and it is actually going out and generating needed resources for this exercise out in Azure as I go. But if I just click on next and go ahead and sign in as this user, and again, my lab doesn't tell me specifically what I need to do. It just assumes that if I'm somebody who's going to design blob storage, I'm going to know how to sign on successfully, right? But here I am inside of Azure. I'm going to go ahead and create my storage account. I'm going to copy my name here. I don't need to view my security center. And once again, I need to know how to do this in order to be able to actually create the storage account. So I'm going to review and create. My validation is passed. If I tried to do something outside of the scope of this, it wouldn't let me do it. It would tell me that hasn't passed that validation. Now it's going to go out and do this. Now this takes a few moments, but once again, I want to clarify, this is challenge-based learning, meaning prove to me that you know how to do this, because we're not going to score you on this. PBT and exams are based on scoring activities and questions. So you always want to make sure that you have the scoring turned on when you're going to do this. But challenge-based learning can combine scoring opportunities to tell people whether or not they have successfully done something. So my deployment is complete. I'm not going to finish up and put the container in, but notice that I can go ahead and check. And now it's going to submit that PowerShell that we saw before to Azure through the cloud subscription. And it's going to say, yep, you successfully created this. no, you didn't successfully create that. All right. Now, the last thing I want to show you is something that some of you may not be familiar with, but as lab developers, you have access to reporting on how people do with your scored labs. And specifically, you can use it to see what people's scores were or what their exam results were. So let's go ahead and just use the example of the multiple choice. When you're a lab developer and I'm logged on as a standard lab developer, I have the ability to find my exam results. And when I click on that, you will see that there were 31 instances. Now, notice here, there were exams that were submitted and were marked as complete, but it doesn't show whether or not they actually passed or not. That was because the scoring was turned off at that time. So it was a lab that had exercises in it, but we don't record the exercises because they didn't actually get to the point where they submitted the scores. But here's an example. You can look here. You can see that I'm out here and I had 1 out of 4. And if I go to my details, you can see the one I got correct and the 2 that I got incorrect. Now remember, it's 4 because the second one was a score of 2, right? So each of these counted as 1 and this one counted as 2. That's how you can weigh questions. But you can see exactly what they did, when they took it, which answers they got correct and which answers they got wrong, and what they selected. You can see here I selected 3 for 2 plus 2 and black for favorite color. And then underlined in green is the correct answer. It should have been 4 and it should have been blue. Okay. So you can view the exam results at just about any time for your activities. All right, so let's go back to the slideshow here. And from my current slide. So it is pretty quick and easy. The main points I want you to take away from this are: A, you need to know what you're testing. B, make sure you're testing real-world skills and real-world knowledge. And C, make sure that you are considering challenge-based learning and doing exams. And they might be 2 different things, right? The randomized features and the grouping and randomizing your answers and the answer locations is really, really important to make sure that you're not getting pattern recognition and even through multiple retakes. All right, so if you want to know more about performance-based testing, you can go to LODS.one/PBT and scoring. All one word, no spaces, no underlines, no underscores, no dashes, or anything like that. So LODS.one/PBT and scoring. It is vital for you to share your feedback with us, please. There's an evaluation at the end of the class where you got the launch button to be able to come into this class and attend the presentation. There's a last activity there that's called a survey. Please fill that out. It is vital for us to be able to make sure that we keep bringing you the most up-to-date and the most correct stuff. So please give us the feedback, positive or what we can do to improve it. We are all ears. Also, we want to know what you want. So if you go to LODS.one/feedback, there is a feature request form there that you can say, I would like to see XYZ. Maybe you'd like to see, I don't know, the ability to submit Python to a VM instead of using PowerShell Bash or command line. Put that in as a feature request right inside that feedback form. Don't forget to post a pic on social media and tag us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And with that, I am going to thank you for your time, but I am also going to open this up to questions and answers.